I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. The idea of getting away from everything, just me and the woods, was exactly what I needed. Life had been too loud, too busy, and I wanted nothing more than silence, just the sound of wind through the trees and the crunch of leaves underfoot. I picked a remote camping spot deep in the mountains. It wasn't an official campsite, just a place I found on an old hiking forum. No cell service, no roads, just a 5-hour hike from where I parked my truck. Exactly what I was looking for. I packed everything carefully. A tent, a sleeping bag rated for the cold, enough food for 3 nights, a hatchet, a knife, a good flashlight with extra batteries, and my old but reliable compass. I had a GPS too, but I preferred to use the compass. Technology failed. Instinct didn't. The hike was rough. The trail was barely visible in some places, just an overgrown path winding through dense forest. It was mid-October, and the air was crisp. Leaves crunched beneath my boots, a mix of oranges, yellows, and browns covering the ground. The deeper I went, the more I felt like I was stepping out of time, like I was going somewhere untouched. It was peaceful. After a long hike, I reached my campsite by late afternoon. A small clearing beside a narrow creek, just big enough for my tent and a fire pit. The trees formed a thick wall around the space, making it feel like my own hidden world. I dropped my pack, stretched my shoulders, and got to work. I set up my tent first, making sure it was on level ground, then gathered enough wood for a fire. As the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat by the fire, eating a simple meal of jerky and a protein bar, washing it down with water from my bottle. The silence was perfect. No voices, no engines, no distant hum of civilization. Just the crackling fire and the occasional rustle in the trees. Probably a squirrel or a raccoon. I wasn't worried about animals. I had bear spray and my food was sealed tight. When night fully set in, I climbed into my tent. The cold was creeping in fast, but my sleeping bag was warm. I left my flashlight within reach just in case. As I lay there, I listened to the sounds of the forest. The wind moving through the trees, the occasional creak of wood shifting, the distant hoot of an owl. Then I heard something else. It was faint at first, a soft, distant sound, like something moving through the underbrush. Not an animal. Too steady, too controlled. I held my breath and listened. It stopped. I waited, my heartbeat slow but heavy. Silence. Probably nothing. My mind playing tricks on me. I rolled onto my side, closed my eyes, and forced myself to relax. The night passed without incident. When I woke up, the air was freezing. My breath came out in white clouds as I unzipped my tent. The fire had died in the night, leaving only cold embers. I made a quick breakfast, stretched my stiff legs, and decided to explore a bit. I followed the creek, moving deeper into the woods. The terrain was rough, filled with fallen logs and rocks covered in damp moss. The forest smelled of earth, leaves, and distant rain. Felt untouched, like no one had walked here in years. Then I saw it. Boot prints. They were fresh. My stomach tightened as I crouched down to examine them. They weren't mine. They were bigger, wider. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. I stood up slowly, scanning the trees. I saw no one, heard nothing, just my own breathing. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Hikers came through here sometimes, even in remote areas. But still, something felt wrong. I turned back toward my campsite, moving a little faster than before. When I got back, my tent was open. I knew I had zipped it shut. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding. Someone had been here. I looked around, my eyes darting to the trees, scanning for movement. Nothing. I took a slow step forward, then another. Peering inside my tent, I saw my gear was untouched. My bag was still there, my food, my flashlight, everything. It didn't make sense. If someone wanted to steal, they would have taken something. If it was an animal, my food would be torn apart. But nothing was missing. Nothing was touched. Someone had just opened my tent, looked inside, and left. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I didn't like this. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe the wind had pulled the zipper down. Maybe I had left it slightly open. But I knew that wasn't true. I packed my things quickly. I didn't want to stay another night. The thought of sleeping out here, knowing someone had been near my tent while I was gone, didn't sit right. I shouldered my pack and started the hike back. The trail felt different this time. The trees seemed closer, the silence heavier. Every now and then, I stopped listening, feeling watched. Then, about an hour into my hike, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. A figure, deep in the trees, standing still, not moving, just standing there, watching me. I didn't hesitate. I walked faster, my hands clenched into fists. I didn't look back. The feeling of being watched didn't go away. When I finally reached my truck, I threw my pack into the back, climbed into the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I started the engine. As I pulled onto the dirt road, I glanced in my rearview mirror. There, just at the tree line, was the figure, still watching, still not moving. I didn't stop. I didn't breathe easy until I was miles away, back on paved roads, civilization creeping back into view. I never went back to that place, never tried to find out who was out there, and I never camp alone anymore. It started as a simple plan. I had been feeling overwhelmed with work, the constant buzzing of city life grinding down on me like sandpaper on skin. I needed a break, some time alone in the quiet, away from emails, traffic, and people. So, I packed my gear, filled my truck with supplies, and drove out to a remote camping spot deep in the forests of Montana. No designated campsites, no fellow campers, just me and nature. That's exactly what I wanted. The drive was long, and by the time I reached the turnoff onto the dirt road leading to my planned campsite, the sun was already low in the sky. I wasn't worried. I had done this before, spent countless nights alone under the stars. I enjoyed the solitude, the challenge of setting up camp, the feeling of being completely disconnected from the modern world. It always gave me a strange sense of peace. I drove for about 20 minutes down the winding dirt road, branches occasionally scraping the side of my truck. Eventually, I found a clearing that looked perfect, flat ground, surrounded by trees, but with a break in the canopy that would let me see the stars. I pulled in, turned off the engine, and just sat for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant call of some unseen bird. It was perfect. I set up my tent quickly, laying out my sleeping bag and rolling my small camping mat beneath it. I collected firewood, stacking it neatly before starting a fire. As the flames grew, I warmed some canned chili over the heat, eating straight from the tin with my spoon. I had a few beers with me, cracked one open, and leaned back in my folding chair, staring up at the sky as darkness settled in. The stars out here were incredible, untouched by city lights. They stretched across the sky in a way that made me feel small, insignificant in the best way possible. The fire crackled beside me, and for a while, I let my mind go blank, just taking in the moment. Then something changed. First, it was just a feeling, a shift in the air. The breeze, which had been steady, died down completely, leaving the trees unnaturally still. The night, which had been filled with the subtle sounds of insects and rustling leaves, grew eerily silent. I didn't even hear the usual night birds anymore. Just nothing. A thick, heavy silence. I sat up, scanning the darkness beyond the fire's glow. My brain told me it was just normal nighttime sounds settling down, that there was nothing to worry about. But my gut told me something different. Something was off. Something I couldn't put my finger on. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly swept the beam through the trees. Nothing, just dense forest. I listened carefully, trying to hear beyond the crackling fire, but there was still only silence. I told myself I was being paranoid, that being alone in the woods at night naturally put my senses on edge. So, I shook it off, finished my beer, and crawled into my tent, zipping it shut behind me. Lying in my sleeping bag, I tried to relax. I told myself that I was safe, that I was alone, that there was nothing out there but trees and animals that wanted nothing to do with me. Eventually, exhaustion won over unease, and I drifted off to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but the fire outside had burned low, casting only faint orange light through the thin fabric of my tent. At first, I didn't know why I was awake. Then I heard it, a single, deliberate footstep just outside my tent. My heart stopped. I held my breath, my body frozen in place, listening. Another step, then another. Slow, heavy, careful. Not an animal, not the rustling of leaves in the wind. These were footsteps, human footsteps. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I was in the middle of nowhere, no campsites for miles. I hadn't seen another person since leaving the main road. So another step, closer this time. I reached for my knife, gripping it so tightly my hand ached. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears, I was afraid whoever was outside might hear it. Then silence. I waited, straining my ears, my eyes locked on the thin wall of my tent, expecting a shadow to pass by at any moment. But there was nothing, just that unnatural, suffocating silence. Minutes passed. My muscles ached from staying so still. I wanted to check outside, to see if I had imagined it, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I just lay there listening, waiting. Then, finally, the sounds of the forest returned. The insects, the distant call of a bird, the normal, comforting sounds of nature, as if nothing had happened. I didn't sleep again that night. When the first light of dawn crept through the trees, I finally unzipped my tent and stepped outside, my knife still in hand. The fire was nothing but glowing embers now, and the woods looked the same as they had the evening before. But then I saw them. Footprints. Clear, human footprints in the dirt, circling my tent. Slow, deliberate steps. And then, about 10 feet away from my tent, they just stopped. No sign of someone walking away. No trail leading back into the woods. Just the final footprints, pressed deep into the soil, as if whoever had stood there had simply vanished. A cold dread settled in my stomach. I packed my gear in record time, barely stopping to eat or drink. I didn't even bother putting out the last of the embers properly. I just wanted to get out of there. I threw my gear into the truck, started the engine, and sped down the dirt road, not stopping until I hit pavement again. I don't know who or what was out there that night. Maybe it was some drifter, some backwoods hermit who had been watching me. Maybe it was something else. I don't know, and I don't want to know. I just know I won't be camping alone ever again. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Just me, the woods, and the sound of nothing but the wind through the trees. No phone, no people, no distractions. I had done solo camping before, but this time I wanted to go deeper into the wilderness, somewhere nobody else would be. I found the spot on an old hiking forum, a remote area, far off the beaten path, miles from any official campsites. The kind of place where you wouldn't see another human for days. That's exactly what I wanted. I drove as far as the dirt roads would take me, then parked my truck at a dead end where the trees started getting thick. The rest of the way I had to hike. It was about 5 miles through dense forest, the trail barely visible in some places, but I had marked my route on a map. I carried everything I needed in my pack: tent, sleeping bag, food, water, a small hatchet, and a hunting knife. By late afternoon, I found a clearing near a small creek. The trees opened up just enough to let the light through, and the ground was soft with pine needles. Perfect. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood, and as the sun started to set, I got a fire going. As the darkness settled in, I ate my dinner and just listened. The woods were alive with the usual sounds: crickets, distant owls, the occasional rustling in the underbrush. Normal stuff. I felt good. But around midnight, I woke up. Something had snapped a branch outside my tent. It wasn't the usual small rustling of a raccoon or a squirrel. It was a solid, deliberate snap. I stayed completely still, listening. At first, I thought it could be a deer, but then I heard something else: footsteps. Slow, careful, trying not to make noise, but stepping on twigs and leaves. I reached for my knife and waited, heart pounding. The footsteps circled around my tent, then stopped. I held my breath. The fire had burned down to embers, so I couldn't see anything beyond the tent walls. Then silence. Nothing. Not a single sound. Even the crickets had gone quiet. I stayed awake for hours, gripping my knife, listening for anything, but whatever it was never came back. By morning, I convinced myself it must have been an animal, maybe a bear sniffing around, but I had no food left out, nothing to attract one. Still, I decided to stay another night. I wasn't going to scare myself out of a trip I had been planning for so long. The second day was normal. I hiked around a bit, collected more firewood, and even found a better spot to get fresh water from the creek. But as the sun started setting, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I'd glance over my shoulder, expecting to see someone standing there, but there was never anything, just trees and shadows. That night, I made sure the fire was bigger. I wanted light. If something was out there, I wanted to see it. I ate my dinner and sat close to the flames, staring into the dark. Hours passed. The woods stayed normal. Wind, bugs, distant sounds. Then, just as I was about to turn in for the night, I heard it again. Footsteps, but this time they weren't careful. They were fast, moving toward my camp. I jumped up, grabbing my knife and flashlight, and shined the beam into the trees. Nothing. I waited, heart racing. Then, from the other direction, another sound: branches snapping, leaves crunching, like something circling me. I swung the light around, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. Still nothing. I backed up toward my tent, scanning the trees. My fire cast long shadows, flickering between the trunks. That's when I saw it, just for a split second. A figure, tall, human-shaped, but moving fast, ducking behind a tree. My stomach dropped. I wasn't alone. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my pack, not even bothering to pack up properly. I shoved my knife into my belt, kicked dirt over the fire to put it out, and started moving. Fast. I didn't take the same trail back. I didn't want whoever was out there to know where I was heading. I cut through the trees, moving as quietly as I could. Every few minutes, I'd stop and listen. The footsteps followed. Not close, but not far either. Whoever it was, they weren't running. They were just following. I kept going, pushing through branches, tripping over roots, my breath coming in short gasps. The moonlight barely made it through the trees, and my flashlight cast shaky beams ahead of me. Then, ahead, I saw something that stopped me cold. A structure. An old wooden shack, half hidden by trees. The door was open just a crack, swinging slightly. I hadn't seen it on the way in. I hadn't seen anything man-made for miles. A terrible feeling crawled up my spine. I turned and bolted in the opposite direction. I didn't care how loud I was anymore. I ran, branches whipping against my face, my pack bouncing against my shoulders. I ran until my lungs burned, until I could see the break in the trees where my truck was parked. I stumbled out of the woods, threw my pack into the truck bed, and fumbled with my keys. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get them into the ignition. The engine roared to life and I tore out of there, speeding down the dirt road, checking my mirrors every few seconds. Nothing followed me. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away, back on the highway, back in civilization. I don't know who was out there. I don't know if they lived in that shack or if they were just passing through like me. But I do know one thing. I was not alone in those woods, and whoever was out there, they didn't want me there either. I never went back. I should have never gone on that trip. I tell myself that every time I close my eyes, every time I try to sleep, but the memories don't let me. Every sound in the night, every rustling leaf, takes me back to that weekend. And no matter how much I tell myself that it's over, that I survived, my mind keeps dragging me back. Started with an idea, as these things always do. A weekend in the woods, away from everything. No cell service, no distractions. Just me, my backpack, my tent, and nature. Sounded perfect. The kind of thing I needed to clear my head. Life had been stressful. Work, responsibilities, the daily cycle of city life grinding me down. I needed a break, and the best way to get it, I thought, was to be alone for a few days. I picked a place deep in the national forest, a spot that wasn't too popular. I didn't want to be anywhere near the designated campgrounds where families and groups would set up their tents and blast music. I wanted to be alone. I studied the maps, planned my route, and packed everything carefully. I had enough food, a good sleeping bag, a knife, a first aid kit, and all the essentials. I told myself I was prepared. I wasn't. The first day was fine. I hiked deep into the woods, following a trail that eventually faded into nothing. That was what I wanted, to be off the beaten path. The further I went, the quieter it got. The kind of silence you don't get in the city. No cars, no voices, just the wind in the trees and the occasional rustling of animals moving through the underbrush. It was peaceful. I set up my tent near a small clearing next to a stream. I gathered wood, built a fire, and cooked a simple meal. As the sun went down, the temperature dropped, and the fire became my only source of warmth and comfort. I sat there, listening to the night, watching the flames dance. It was exactly what I had wanted. The first strange thing happened that night. I woke up sometime past midnight, not sure why. I lay there listening. It was dead silent. No wind, no insects, nothing. Just stillness. And then I heard it, a soft crunching sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, close. My breath caught in my throat. I reached for my flashlight and turned it on, aiming it at the trees. Nothing, just the dark shapes of branches swaying slightly in the breeze. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a deer, maybe something smaller. I tried to shake it off and went back to sleep. The next morning, I found something odd. Around my campsite, the ground was disturbed. It wasn't just the marks from my own movements. There were footprints.
Bare footprints.
Human. They circled my tent, stopping just a few feet from where I had been sleeping. My stomach dropped. I hadn't seen another person the entire hike. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. My first instinct was to pack up and leave, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was an old footprint. Maybe my mind was making it seem worse than it was. I convinced myself to stay. That was a mistake. That night, I built my fire bigger than before. I wanted light as much as I could get. I sat there for hours, staring into the trees, listening. Every snap of a branch made my muscles tighten. I ate without tasting my food, too on edge to enjoy it. Finally, exhaustion got the best of me, and I crawled into my tent, keeping my knife close by. I woke up to the sound of breathing, not my own, something else, someone else. It was right outside the tent. Slow, deep breaths. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My mind screamed at me to do something, but I couldn't. I just lay there, frozen, listening. The breathing continued for what felt like hours. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I stayed awake until the first light of dawn, gripping my knife so hard my hand ached. When I finally forced myself out of the tent, my campsite was different. My gear had been moved. My backpack was open. My supplies shifted around. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. Just rearranged. Like someone had been going through my things, studying them. I didn't hesitate this time. I packed up everything as fast as I could. I was leaving. I didn't care how long the hike back was. I was getting out. I started walking, moving fast, almost jogging. Every sound made me whip around, expecting to see someone behind me, but the woods were empty. At least that's what I kept telling myself. I was maybe 2 hours into my hike back when I found something that stopped me cold. A rope, stretched between two trees at chest height, like a tripwire. My stomach clenched. That hadn't been there before. Someone had put it there after I passed through. Someone was trying to slow me down. I stepped over it and kept going, my heart hammering. I knew now, without a doubt, that I wasn't alone. Someone had been watching me, following me, and they didn't want me to leave. I kept moving, forcing myself not to run, not to panic. But then I saw something else. A figure in the trees far ahead, standing still, watching me. I don't remember much after that. I ran. I don't know how long, how far, but I ran until my legs burned, until my lungs felt like they would explode. I didn't stop until I reached my car. I threw my gear inside, started the engine, and tore out of there, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. I don't know who they were. I don't know what they wanted, but I know they were real, and I know they're still out there, waiting. I had planned a solo camping trip in the middle of nowhere, deep in the Oregon wilderness. I had done my research, packed everything I needed, and set out early in the morning to get to my campsite before dark. I parked my truck at the edge of a dirt road and hiked about 4 miles into the woods, far from any trails or other campers. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, just me, nature, and a break from the world. The first day was fine. I set up my tent in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. I gathered firewood, boiled some water for my dehydrated meals, and sat by the fire, enjoying the silence. It was colder than I expected that night, but nothing too bad. I listened to the sounds of the forest, twigs snapping in the distance, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves as a breeze moved through the trees. I fell asleep quickly. The next morning, I woke up feeling well-rested and eager to explore. I spent most of the day hiking, venturing deeper into the forest, marking my path as I went. I didn't see a single person, which was exactly what I wanted. Complete isolation. But as I made my way back to camp in the late afternoon, I noticed something odd. Some of my firewood had been moved. Not scattered, not knocked over, moved. Neatly stacked in a different way than I had left it. At first, I thought maybe I had just misremembered how I stacked it the night before. But as I looked around, I realized my sleeping bag inside the tent had also shifted slightly. The zipper was half open, though I knew I had zipped it up before leaving that morning. I stood there for a while, listening, looking around. There was no sign of anyone, no footprints besides my own, no broken branches or disturbed undergrowth. just the quiet hum of the forest. It was unsettling, but I convinced myself I was overthinking it. Maybe I had left the tent unzipped and the wind had moved the bag slightly. Maybe I had stacked the wood differently and just forgot. I had no reason to believe someone had been there. That night, I kept my fire going longer than usual. Something about the darkness felt heavier, like the silence itself had changed. The usual night sounds were still there, but it felt different. I sat by the fire for hours, staring into the trees, listening. Nothing happened. Eventually, I went into my tent, zipped it up all the way, and forced myself to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the leaves just outside my tent. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps stopped. The silence was unbearable. Then I heard something worse. Breathing, just outside my tent. Steady, slow breathing. I lay completely still, every muscle in my body tensed. Whoever was out there wasn't moving anymore, just standing there, breathing. I didn't know what to do. I had a knife in my backpack, but it was on the other side of the tent, and I didn't want to make a single sound. I thought about calling out, but something told me that was the wrong move. Then the breathing stopped. The footsteps started again, moving away from my tent, slow and measured. I waited, heart still hammering, until the sounds faded into the distance. I didn't sleep after that. I just lay there, gripping my knife, waiting for the first light of dawn. As soon as the sun came up, I packed my stuff as fast as I could. I didn't even eat breakfast. I just shoved everything into my bag, kicked dirt over my fire, and started hiking back toward my truck. My mind kept racing. Who was out there? Why were they just standing by my tent in the middle of the night? I moved fast, barely stopping, trying to put as much distance between myself and that campsite as possible. I was about a mile from my truck when I saw it. Nailed to a tree right by the trail at eye level was a piece of old, dirty cloth. And written on it, in what looked like charcoal or maybe burnt wood, was one word: run. I felt like the ground dropped out from under me. My legs locked up for a second. My breathing turned shallow. Someone had been following me, watching me, and they had left that message knowing I would see it. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted the rest of the way to my truck, throwing my bag into the back and fumbling with my keys. The second I got the engine started, I peeled out, speeding down the dirt road, glancing in my rearview mirror the entire time. I didn't stop driving until I was back in town. Even then, I kept checking my surroundings, half expecting to see someone watching me from the trees. I didn't sleep for days after that. I couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was out there, they weren't just passing through. They had been watching me, and they wanted me to know it. I don't go camping alone anymore, and I don't think I ever will again. I should have trusted my gut. When I first saw the campsite, something felt off. I had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. Just me, the woods, and nothing but time. I wanted to disconnect from the noise of life, from the endless notifications, emails, and people. I had picked a remote spot in the national forest, far from the usual campgrounds. No cell service, no roads within a few miles. Just the way I wanted it. The first day was fine. I set up my tent near a clearing, just a few feet from the tree line, close to a small creek. The forest was alive with sound, birds, rustling leaves, the occasional snap of a twig under a wandering deer. I made a fire, cooked some canned food, and watched the sky go dark as the stars came out. It was peaceful. That night, though, was the first sign something was wrong. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again. something moving outside my tent. It wasn't heavy, not like a bear or anything big, but it wasn't small either. It moved slowly, deliberately. I held my breath and listened. The steps stopped just outside my tent. I reached for my flashlight but hesitated. I didn't want to scare whatever it was and make it attack. So I just lay there listening. After a few minutes, the steps moved away. I exhaled and told myself it was probably a raccoon or something. I forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I found footprints around my tent. Not paw prints, footprints. Bare human feet. They circled my tent a few times before wandering off into the woods. My stomach sank. I tried to convince myself that maybe someone was camping nearby. Maybe a hiker got lost. But the nearest trail was miles away, and I hadn't seen another person since I left my truck. I spent the day trying to shake the feeling of being watched. I went down to the creek to fill my water bottles and caught myself glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. The trees seemed thicker, the silence heavier. I told myself I was being paranoid. That night, I built a bigger fire, hoping it would keep anything or anyone away. I sat up later than usual, scanning the tree line, listening. The night stretched on, and I finally convinced myself to get some sleep. Sometime after midnight, I woke up again. I didn't hear anything at first, but the feeling was back. Something was wrong. I stayed still, straining to listen. Then, just outside the tent, I heard breathing. Slow, steady breathing. Not an animal. Person. My heart pounded so hard I thought whoever it was could hear it. I reached for the hunting knife I kept next to my sleeping bag. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate. Then the zipper of my tent moved. Just a tiny sound, like fingers testing it. I shot up and yanked my knife out of its sheath. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice hoarse. The sound stopped. Silence. Then, footsteps, fast, retreating into the woods. I sat there for what felt like an hour, gripping the knife, barely breathing. When the sun finally rose, I packed up. I didn't care that I had planned to stay for 3 more days. I needed to leave. But when I stepped out of the tent, my blood ran cold. There were more footprints, dozens of them, circling my tent. Some led into the trees, others came from the creek. Whoever had been out there hadn't just been watching me. They had been surrounding me. I grabbed my pack, doused the fire, and practically ran through the woods back to my truck. Every snap of a twig sent my heart racing. I kept expecting to see someone step out from behind a tree, but I never did. When I finally reached my truck, I threw my gear inside and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to slow my breathing. Then I saw it. On the back window of my truck, smeared in dirt, were 2 words. "See you. I never camped alone again." Started as a simple weekend getaway. Just me, the woods, and some time away from everything. I had been stressed with work, barely sleeping, eating like crap, and feeling like I was running on empty. I needed a break. A friend of mine had mentioned this remote campsite up north, deep in the woods, way off the main trails. It wasn't an official campsite, just a clearing he had stumbled on years ago. No people, no noise, just nature, he had said. That sounded perfect. I packed up my gear and left early Saturday morning. The drive took longer than expected. The paved roads turned into gravel, and then gravel turned into dirt, with my truck bouncing over potholes and loose rocks. I had printed a map cell service had cut out about an hour back. The directions seemed straightforward, but the deeper I got, the more unsure I became. Still, I pressed on, my truck kicking up dust in the late afternoon sun. When I finally arrived, the place was beautiful. A wide clearing surrounded by tall pines, a small stream running nearby, and no signs of anyone having been here for a long time. It was perfect. I set up my tent, gathered some firewood and started a small fire as the sun began to dip below the trees. The air was crisp, cooler than I expected for early autumn. The silence was almost unnerving, but I reminded myself that this was exactly what I wanted: solitude. After dinner, I sat by the fire, enjoying the quiet. The only sounds were the crackling of the flames and the occasional rustle in the trees. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe a small animal. The fire burned low, and I decided to turn in for the night. As I zipped up my tent, I had this weird feeling, like I was being watched. I shook it off. My brain was just playing tricks on me. I was alone. That's what I wanted. I fell asleep quickly, but something woke me up. A sound. Not an animal, not the wind, something else. It was a steady, rhythmic crunching. Footsteps. I held my breath, listening. The sound stopped. My heart pounded in my ears. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a deer. Maybe I had imagined it. I turned over and tried to sleep. But then it started again. Slow, deliberate steps just outside my tent. I could hear the leaves and twigs snapping underfoot. It wasn't random. It wasn't an animal wandering. It was someone or something moving with purpose. I reached for my flashlight, but my hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it. I didn't dare turn it on. I just lay there, frozen, listening. The steps circled my tent, stopping every few seconds. I could feel my breath catching in my throat, trying not to make a sound. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Every little noise made me jump. I waited for dawn, gripping the small camping knife I had packed, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe I had heard something far away, and my brain twisted it into something worse. I told myself that when the sun came up, I'd pack up and leave. Dawn finally came, and I crawled out of the tent, exhausted but relieved. The clearing looked the same, peaceful, untouched. But then I saw them. Footprints. Human footprints. Not mine. They circled my tent, looping around several times, then leading back into the trees. I grabbed my gear, packed up as fast as I could, and didn't stop until I reached my truck. I didn't even eat breakfast. I just drove. The entire way back, I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see someone, following me. I never saw anyone. I still don't know who was out there. I don't know what they wanted, why they were watching me, or what would have happened if I had stepped out of my tent that night. I just know that I will never go camping alone again.